welcome back to the www Plaid Avenger.com, where we just don't want to hear the news. We want to understand that news. And I'm going to have to chill out today, not try to make jokes or have explicatives flying, because of course the biggest news on planet Earth right this second is this ginormous Japanese earthquake and subsequent tsunami, which has killed tens of thousands of people in Japan. Now, I'm not going to get into the particulars of geology or earthquakes or tsunamis or the death count or the destruction. That's what the regular news is doing for you nonstop. Let's spend some time together now talking about some bigger global repercussions of this, I'm going to go ahead and call it, historic event in Japan. Let's entitle this one, Japanese Quake Shakes the World. And it really does. This is a sentinel, I'm calling it out on the carpet, historic event. And what I mean by that is earthquakes happen all the time, my friends. Tsunamis happen a lot too. Not all of them change history. This one's going to. 100 years from now in textbooks, they will reference the Japanese quake of 2011 as a sentinel event in not just Japanese history, but Asian history and world history as a whole. So what's the big deal about this titanic event? Well, before I go any further, and this is more of a rant, my friends. I'm not going to lie to you. This is not a typical lesson. I've had hundreds of folks dialing in saying, Plaid Avenger, what's your take on this? What's going on? Hook us up with the details. And I wanted to give it a couple days to see what was going on, let things settle out before I talk about such a hot event. And it's a very serious event too, so I don't want to berate, belittle, or otherwise make fun of or light of these very, very, very heavy circumstances going on in Japan. They're already calling it out on the carpet as maybe 10,000 dead. I think with their reservations, by the end of this, there's going to be 20 to 50,000 Japanese people dead, and that's heavy. Billions of dollars worth of damage, and that's heavy as well. But let's back it up and look at the bigger picture, because actually that's much more serious than the death, destruction, and monetary loss right this second. And again, I'm not making or playing down the loss of human life. It's horrifically bad. But this event has repercussions way beyond that. Now, what I'm speaking specifically of here is that this is really going to change the course of Japanese history. And it's going to affect world prices and world attitudes of energy resources for some time to come, if not forever. What am I talking about specifically? Well, you know what? Because this is a rant, before I even get to that stuff, let me go ahead and give kudos to the Japanese people, the Japanese government as a whole. And what I mean by that is that, yes, there's going to be 20 to 50,000 people dead. It's terrible. It's terrible. Dudes, this is a testament to how awesome Japan is, to how awesome their preparedness is, to how awesome their earthquake readiness is, their earthquake-ready architecture, their emergency services, their technology, everything. Here's why. Had this earthquake, and this is an 8.9 or 9.0 Richter scale earthquake. Wow. Had this earthquake happened anywhere else on planet Earth, it would have killed millions. Millions! And again, it's a testament, and my hat is tipped off, and kudos to the Japanese people and Japanese government, because it's a miracle that it didn't kill millions of people. Downtown Tokyo had 20 to 30 million people in it when this 9.0 earthquake hit it. It's incredible. There's hardly any loss of life in a major, one of the biggest metropolitan areas on planet Earth. That's because they're ready for it, because it was expected. Earthquakes are a part of life in Japan. It's part of their history. It's part of their present. It's part of their future. They sit on top of 4 colliding plates of plate tectonic theory. This is just one of the biggest ones in Japanese recorded history. In fact, it is the biggest in Japanese recorded history. It's possibly the biggest in Japanese history, period. But they didn't have the Richter scale and all the machines to measure this stuff 1,000 years ago. So this is a titanic, ginormous event that's not unexpected. And it was well prepared for. And thank goodness for that, because this would, if this would happen in China or India or hell, parts of Europe, this would have killed millions of people. It's bad enough 20 or 50 or 1,000 are dead, but it's a very great thing that Japan was so prepared for. Okay, that's kind of the good news in this. And by the way, what killed most of the people, of course, was not the earthquake itself, because the Japanese have the highest levels of technology and readiness and preparedness and architecture for just such events. What has killed the most people, of course, was the subsequent tsunami, whenever this big, gigantic chunk of earth sank at about 1 meter a second just off the coast of Japan. This created a surge of water which floated inland very rapidly and destroyed several whole towns in northern Japan. So horrific event, but the silver lining here is, wow, they did a really good job, and they're still doing a good job, and the world's trying to help them out with this good job. And I will throw in this as well, although there's been decades of animosity between China and Japan, two countries which have not liked each other, which have been kind of squaring off to be competitors here in the 21st century as China rises and Japan's already rich. Even China has come forward and said we're going to give aid and try to help out Japan any way we can. So again, that's another silver lining. This may improve relations between Japan and a lot of its neighbors. But I don't like to sugarcoat stuff. Now let me get to the meat and potatoes of this podcast. This is bad news for Japan. Yeah, it's duh. You're saying, what the hell is the Plaid Avenger talking about? Of course it's bad news. No. Earthquakes happen. Tsunamis happen. This one's of particular significance because of its size, because of the destructive event itself, but also because it comes precisely at possibly the worst moment in Japanese history for the last 30 years. And that is that this is going to go down in history as kind of, and I'm not going to say the beginning of the end of the Japanese economy, but the Japanese economy has already been stagnant for decades. For like 2 decades, it's been flat. No growth. And in fact, the Japanese population itself has had no growth. It's been getting negative. There's been fewer and fewer people in Japan to work the jobs, to work the factories, to make all the money, to pay the taxes. Japan has been in a real slump. Demographically, its population hasn't been growing. In fact, it's been shrinking. And economically, they've been kind of shrinking and stagnant too. So right at this particular juncture, when they have just lost their #2 world biggest economy slot to China just last year, China, which has been growing fast, became the 2nd biggest economy on planet Earth, displacing Japan to the #3 slot. And right at this precise time is when Japan gets whammied with this titanic 100-year event, which ain't gonna help matters. Again, to rephrase, to pull back, to summarize, Japan for 2 decades has been on a downward slump, and this may be the thing that finishes them off. It may not. Maybe they'll rally. The Japanese Prime Minister Naoto Kan has already suggested that this is the biggest emergency and the biggest deal in Japan since they got destroyed in World War II. I think that is an exact right way to phrase it. And after World War II, they rallied to become the world's 2nd richest country on planet Earth. So maybe they'll do it again. But quite frankly, you know I like to speak honestly, the chips are against them. The cards are stacked against them on this one. They've been hurting demographically, economically, and also politically. They've been absolutely gridlocked and stagnant again for almost a decade. So this could not come at a worse time for Japan. And my plaid heart goes out to them. This is the worst time for this to happen. But I want you to understand what's really going on here. And I think that this is really, again, not the beginning of the end. That sounds so final. But Japan as the 2nd biggest economy, okay, now they're the 3rd biggest economy, I think you're going to continue to see them slump and slide down the world's biggest economy, top 10 and top 20 for probably the rest of your life. Again, they may rally. I just can't see it because they're going down at a time and getting hit with this. right, when China's rising, when South Korea is doing well, when Indonesia's doing well, when Vietnam and India are all rising Asian powers, Japan is kind of trailing off to the side. Now, that's a historic event for Japan. I started this podcast by saying that this is a world event. And it really is. And I'm not talking about the tsunami going out and hitting other parts of the world, because it did minimal damage everywhere else. This has world repercussions that we are going to be feeling for quite some time to come, if not for the rest of our lives. And what I'm talking about here is, of course, the unfolding possible nuclear disaster, which is now happening in Japan. The earthquake happened March 11th. We're here now several days later. I intentionally did not do a podcast on this for a little while to kind of let things settle out to see what was really going on. I'm not the type of guy that likes to report on the death and destruction part. I don't like that part. It bores me. There's no significance to me just to tell you how many people are dead. I want to see what's really unfolding so you understand the situation, the repercussions, and the real repercussions for this globally is this impending now nuclear disaster. 3 nuclear power plants in Japan are in trouble. A couple of them are in possible meltdown. The emergency systems possibly are failing. They can't get the water in there to cool the core well enough. And I'm generalizing here for my nuclear friends. Don't fault me for that. What does this mean for the world? Well, Japan relies on nuclear energy for 35% of its domestic power. Japan has no natural resources for energy. It doesn't have oil, it doesn't have coal, it doesn't have anything else. So for decades, it's built up its nuclear energy industry as the energy core to fuel its economy, to fuel the factories that make Mitsubishis and Nintendos and Kawasaki's and Toyotas. A lot of this has come from nuclear energy. It's a third of their energy resources, man. And with this event happening, and I'm not even talking about the possible a radioactive spill and perhaps more loss of life and limb due to that. Let's pretend that that doesn't happen. The simple shutdown of these reactors is going to have a ripple effect, which means they'll probably start shutting down other reactors just to be on the safe side of things, which means that they are going to be losing their domestic energy capability. Okay, so what, Plaid Avenger? That's still only affecting the Japanese economy, which is going to continue to make it spiral downward. Well, hold on there, friends. When they stop producing nuclear energy, because everybody in the country is now going to be terrified of it, where are they going to get energy from? Because they got to have energy to run the factories and to keep the lights on and the dishwashers on and the TVs on across Japan. They're going to have to import that energy. And that will definitely have global repercussions in that they will be importing more oil. You knew it. The big O word was coming. And the press has started to report about this just a little bit. But this has repercussions, I think, for the next year to 10 years out. In that as Japan, the third largest economy on planet Earth, one of the biggest energy consumers per capita on planet Earth right after the United States, they're going to have to get their energy somewhere else. They're going to have to import a lot more oil, which means for the rest of the planet, oil demand is going to go way up. And by the way, as a sideline note to all this, this is happening at the exact time that Libya is in a full-scale civil war, and their oil production is down. So what you have is several events all culminating right this second. The production is going down. At the same time, demand is going to start going through the roof. That means prices will very likely reach an all-time high for human history for oil. This precious commodity that we're all addicted to like crack cocaine. I'm sorry, that's the real global repercussion of this horrific event that's happened in Japan, is that probably in the next 6 months to a year, the price of oil per barrel will reach its historic high. That which means gas prices in the world will start reaching historic highs, and that might not go away for some time to come. They can't just overnight start making a lot more oil. They're going to do their best. But there's going to be some short-term and even middle-term huge consequences economically for the rest of the planet. And the other thing, which really bugs me a lot, is that this possible nuclear plant meltdown, which people, of course, are terrified of, rightly so. The idea of putting radioactive material in the air or having a core meltdown like in Chernobyl and causing huge environmental disaster. The other global repercussion of that particular event is that nuclear energy, which has been getting very popular in the last year to 2 years, a lot more people have talked about it, even in the United States. A lot of folks all over the world have said maybe we should move more towards nuclear energy. It is cleaner. It's better for global warming. It's better for lots of things. Yeah, there's radioactive stuff we have to deal with, but it's not that big a deal. There's not been that many disasters up until this. If this Japanese power plants, if this turns into a full-blown meltdown with more environmental destruction and human death, this is going to stymie the nuclear energy industry worldwide, and particularly right there in the United States, a country that has been loath to try to invest more into nuclear energy. So again, here is a seismic event, a historic, huge seismic event in a country, a small island country off the eastern coast of Asia, which is going to have these global repercussions for the price of oil, but also for the long-term future of investment in nuclear energy and reliance on nuclear energy for domestic demand in countries all over the planet. Because, by the way, 35% may sound like a really high number. You're like, wow, Japan gets a third of its energy from nuclear power, which may now be going away in the next month. Yeah, but they're not even the biggest. France gets 2/3 of its energy, or 3/4 of its energy from nuclear power. Lots of countries in Eastern Europe get over half of their power from nuclear energy, like Ukraine, I think Slovenia, Slovakia, I think Switzerland uses a lot of nuke power. So, and India and China have been looking big time into investing into nuclear energy because they don't want to have to buy hell tons of oil from the Middle East and other places, or use more polluting energy sources like coal. So nuclear energy, again, has been on the rise and been looking very promising for the last 10 years. But this particular one event may stymie that industry in a very, very big way, which is going to, on the flip side of that, increase the demand for oil, possibly even coal and natural gas. And those prices are going to go through the roof. And I hate that because just let me go ahead and put my plaid cards on the table. I've been a kind of proponent of nuclear energy. It's better than burning fossil fuels indefinitely until we get some other alternative energies going out there. And I really looked at Japan as kind of a classic, wow. Well, they're the most prepared country for an earthquake, and they rely heavily on nuclear energy. So of course, they probably have the best infrastructure and the most safeguards in place in case of an earthquake for their nuclear energy industry, and that appears to have not been the case. In fact, some of the seedier details are starting to float out now that this is a full-blown emergency after the tsunami and earthquake, is that perhaps there were other accidents and other bad things which have happened in the Japanese industry which have not been widely reported. And again, I feel terrible about this because I look to the Japanese as being on the forefront, that if any country on the planet would have had the best safeguards in place for any sort of nuclear disaster, it would have been the Japanese. And it looks like they've failed. And so this is a bad omen for any nuclear energy anywhere else on the planet. Does that make a little sense? So again, domo arigato. We feel terrible for the absolute loss of life and destruction in Japan because of this historic seismic event. But don't feel like in this globalized world that it doesn't affect you wherever you are on the planet, because inevitably you're now going to be paying more for gas as the Japanese have to import more oil, and the use of nuclear energy will likely be stymied, if not outright killed, in other parts of the planet, particularly the United States, if this earthquake disaster in Japan turns into a nuclear disaster in Japan. So to end on a serious note, wish I could make you laugh right here at the end. But that's all we got for now, and I hope you understand a little bit more about the global repercussions of this specifically Japanese event that we hope everybody gets through as best they can. Our hearts and prayers go out to them, but it don't look good. In fact, before I sign off, I think right at this particular juncture, you're also seeing Japan sliding, not off the world stage, but this may be the historic moment that China really and truly supersedes Japan as the premier Asian power in this neighborhood for the rest of this century, if not for the rest of the millennium. This is no disrespect to the Japanese, but you see all of these events culminating at the exact same time, and this earthquake is a kind of a capstone that this may be, for historians of the future, the moment that China took over as the main Asian power and Japan became a very far secondary power in this hood. But that's all I got for now, and we're out.